The military base on planet was busy that morning. Soldiers from 3 different species walked through the metal halls. They came from Earth, from Prime, and from the Empire. The Galactic Alliance had brought them together for joint training exercises. Sergeant walked slowly through the common room. He was a quiet man with gray hair at his temples. His face showed many years of hard service. He carried a small bag with his personal things. He found an empty table near the window and sat down. The common room was large. It had metal walls and bright lights from above. Tables and chairs filled the space. Soldiers sat in groups, talking and laughing. The smell of different foods mixed in the air. Each species had their own meals prepared by the base kitchen. Opened his bag and took out a worn book. The cover was old and soft from many years of use. The title said Legends of Korea in faded gold letters. He opened it carefully and began to read. At the next table, 5 soldiers sat together. They were tall beings with blue-gray skin. Their bodies were thick with muscle. They had 4 arms each, and their faces had sharp features. Their eyes were yellow and always seemed angry. They were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors. The leader of this group was Commander. He was larger than the others. His voice was deep and loud. He noticed the human reading alone. "Look at that," said to his companions. "The human reads a book made of paper. How primitive." The other laughed. Their laughter was harsh, like rocks hitting metal. "What does he read?" asked another named. "Perhaps instructions on how to tie his boots." More laughter followed. Did not look up from his book. He had heard such comments many times before. 3 soldiers joined the table. They were different from They had green skin that shined like polished stone. Their bodies were thin but strong. They had 2 arms like humans, but their fingers were long and elegant. They considered themselves the most civilized species in the Alliance. "What is so funny?" asked Lieutenant Veen, the leader. She had silver markings on her face that showed her rank. Pointed at with one of his 4 hands. "The human reads an old book, physical paper. Can you believe it?" Veen looked at with curiosity. "What book is it?" Stood up and walked to his table. He was not trying to be quiet. His heavy feet made the floor shake slightly. Human said, "Show us your book." Finally looked up. His eyes were calm and steady. He did not show fear or anger. He simply looked at the like one might look at a curious child. "It is a book of stories," said. His voice was soft but clear. "Legends from my homeland on Earth." Grabbed the book from the table. He did not ask permission. He carried it back to the group of alien soldiers. "Legends," said with a laugh. "Let us see what the humans consider legendary." Took the book and opened it roughly. The old pages made a sound of protest. He looked at the pictures inside. His yellow eyes grew wide, but not with respect. "What is this creature?" asked. He pointed at a picture of a dragon, a flying lizard that breathes fire. The soldiers all leaned in to see. When they saw the dragon, they burst into laughter. "The humans believe in fire-breathing reptiles?" Veen asked. Her tone was mocking. "This is what their warriors fear." "No wonder they are so weak," said another. "They are afraid of imaginary animals." Turned more pages. He found stories of ancient warriors. He found tales of spirits and gods. Each new page brought more laughter from the group. "Look at this," said. "They believe in invisible spirits that haunt old houses, and warriors who could cut through stone with their swords." "Impossible," said a soldier named. "No metal blade can cut stone. This is foolish fantasy." Veen took the book next. She read some of the words with difficulty. "These are not legends. These are fairy tales for children. Do humans really believe this nonsense?" Remained at his table. He watched them handle his book. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes had changed. They had grown darker, more focused. Anyone who knew him well would recognize that look. It was the look he had before every battle. "On Prime, we have no such fantasies," announced loudly. He wanted everyone in the common room to hear. Our history is based on facts, on real battles and real victories. We do not invent monsters to explain our fears. They are the same, Veen added. Our culture is built on logic and reason. We left such primitive thinking behind thousands of years ago. More soldiers from both species gathered around. They all wanted to see the human book. They all wanted to laugh at the strange pictures and impossible stories. This one shows a warrior fighting a tiger, said, with his bare hands. No weapons, just his body against a giant predator. Impossible, said. No being can defeat a predator without weapons. The human body is too soft, too weak. At this, finally stood up. He walked slowly to the group. Every alien soldier watched him approach. He was not as tall as he was not as elegant as he was just an old human with tired eyes and gray hair. "May I have my book back?" asked politely. Looked down at him. The commander was almost 2 feet taller than the human. His 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. "First, explain this to us," said. "Do your people actually believe these stories? Do you think dragons are real? Do you think humans can fight tigers with their hands?" Was quiet for a moment. He looked at all the faces around him. All of them waiting for his answer, all of them ready to laugh. "These stories are very old," said. "They come from a time before humans traveled to the stars, before we had ships and weapons like we have now." "So they are just old lies," said. "Stories to scare children." "No," said. His voice remained calm. "They are memories. They are how our ancestors remembered important truths." Veen laughed. "What truth can come from a story about a flying lizard?" "The dragon represents many things," explained. "Power, wisdom, sometimes danger. Our ancestors could not write detailed history books, so they put their knowledge into stories, stories that could be remembered and passed down." Shook his head. "This is foolish. On Prime, we carved our history into stone, every battle recorded exactly as it happened. No dragons, no spirits, just facts." "And your soldiers are the best because of this?" asked. "Of course," said proudly. "We train based on reality, not fantasy." Nodded slowly. "I see. Then you would not be interested in what these legends actually teach." "Teach?" laughed. "What can a story about ghosts teach a warrior?" Looked at the young soldier. "Many things, if you know how to read them." "Read them?" said. "The words are simple. Even I can read them. There is nothing hidden in these children's tales." "Then you read only the surface," said. "Like looking at an ocean and seeing only waves, not understanding the depths below." This made some of the soldiers uncomfortable. They did not like being compared to fools who could not see beneath the surface. "Show us then," Veen challenged. "Show us what deep meaning hides in your stories of monsters and magic." Looked at her for a long moment. Then he gently took his book from his hands. The commander was so surprised by the human's calm confidence that he let it go. "I cannot show you by talking," said. "Some things must be demonstrated." "Demonstrated?" laughed. "Will you breathe fire like your dragon?" A few soldiers laughed, but not as many as before. There was something in the old human's manner that made them uncertain. "Perhaps not fire," said. He turned and walked back toward his table. "But there are other lessons in these pages, lessons that your history books of facts could never teach." He sat down and began to read again, as if nothing had happened, as if he had not just challenged an entire room of alien warriors. Felt angry. The human had not argued or fought back. He had simply spoken with confidence and walked away. It made the feel like the foolish one. "The human thinks he knows something we do not," said loudly to his companions. "But what can humans know? They nearly destroyed their own planet. They killed millions of their own kind in wars. They are barely civilized." "They were the last species invited to the Alliance," Veen agreed. "And only because they had numbers, not because they had worth." The alien soldiers returned to their seats. They continued to talk and laugh about the book, But their laughter was not as confident now. The old human's words stayed in their minds. What did he mean by demonstrations? What lessons could old stories possibly teach modern warriors? Continued reading. He knew they were still talking about him. He did not care. He had seen this same scene play out many times before. Aliens always underestimated humans at first. They looked at human bodies and saw weakness. They looked at human culture and saw primitivism. They never looked deeper, not until they were forced to. Turned a page in his book. The next chapter was about ancient warriors who trained in the mountains. Warriors who could do things that seemed impossible. Things that alien science would call fantasy. But knew the truth. He had trained in those same mountains. He had learned from masters who preserved the old ways, ways that had kept humanity alive through thousands of years of war and struggle. The aliens thought myths were lies. They thought legends were fantasies for children. They would learn differently. Soon. Closed his book and finished his tea. The morning training would begin in 1 hour. He would watch the aliens demonstrate their superior techniques. He would listen to them boast about their advanced methods. And then, when the time was right, he would show them what human myths really contained. Not fairy tales, not children's stories, but the concentrated wisdom of 10,000 years of combat, encoded in stories so they could never be lost, preserved in legends so they could never be forgotten. The aliens had much to learn, and their first lesson was about to begin. The training arena was massive. It could hold hundreds of soldiers at once. The floor was made of special material that could absorb impact. The walls rose high above, covered with observation windows. Officers from all 3 species watched from those windows. Captain stood near the entrance. She had arrived at the base only that morning. She was here to inspect the human soldiers and observe the joint training. Her uniform was simple and clean. Her black hair was tied back in a neat bun. She was not tall, but something about her presence made people notice her. She had heard about the incident in the common room. News traveled fast on military bases. A group of alien soldiers had mocked a human sergeant and his book of legends. The sergeant had stayed calm. He had not reported the incident. He had simply returned to his duties. New sergeant by reputation. He was one of the most decorated soldiers in the human forces. His service record was full of missions that seemed impossible, missions that he had completed anyway, yet he never talked about himself. He never demanded respect. He simply did his job and read his old books. The training session began. Commander led his soldiers onto the arena floor. They moved with the confidence of natural predators. Their 4 arms made them formidable in close combat. They could attack from multiple angles at once. Lieutenant Veen brought her soldiers in from the other side. They were graceful and quick. Their fighting style was based on mathematics and precision, every move calculated, every strike designed for maximum efficiency. The human soldiers stood in the middle. Sergeant was among them. He wore standard training clothes, nothing special, nothing that showed his rank or experience. "Today we demonstrate combat techniques," announced the training officer. He was a general named. "Each species will show their traditional fighting methods. This will help us understand each other better. Perhaps we will learn from one another." Stepped forward first. "They will demonstrate the art of overwhelming force," he said proudly. "Our ancestors developed these techniques on our home world. They have never failed us in battle." The soldiers began their demonstration. It was impressive. They used all 4 arms in coordinated attacks. They moved like machines of destruction. Their strikes were powerful enough to break bones. Their defense seemed impossible to penetrate. The officers watching from above nodded with approval. They were indeed fearsome warriors. Next came Veen led her soldiers through an elegant display of movement. They spun and twisted like dancers, but every motion was deadly. They targeted pressure points. They used angles and leverage to defeat larger opponents. The way is about intelligence, Veen explained. We do not rely on brute strength. We use the enemy's force against them. More approval from the observers. The style was beautiful and effective. Finally, it was time for the humans to demonstrate. A young human lieutenant named stepped forward. He was nervous. He knew the aliens were waiting to mock whatever the humans showed. Began with basic combat moves, punches, kicks, blocks. The techniques were solid but not spectacular. The alien soldiers watched with barely hidden smiles. "Is this all?" whispered two. "Simple hitting and kicking. Even children on Prime can do better." Laughed quietly. "The humans have no special abilities. Their bodies are slow and weak. Why did the Alliance even include them?" Heard these whispers. She stood at the edge of the arena watching everything. Her face showed nothing, but her mind was working. When finished, there was polite applause, nothing more. The message was clear. Human combat techniques were the weakest of the three. "Thank you, Lieutenant," said General. "Now let us begin mixed sparring. This will help us learn how different styles interact." The sparring matches began, fought against humans. Humans fought against. The results were predictable. The one most of their matches through pure power, the one through speed and precision. The humans struggled against both. A young human soldier faced a warrior named Crag. She was fast and clever, but Crag had 4 arms. Every time she blocked one attack, 2 more came from different directions. Within seconds, she was on the ground. "Point 2, announced the judge. Crag stood over her with all 4 arms raised in victory. "Humans should stay on their soft planet," he said. "Leave real fighting to real warriors." "Watch this." Her expression remained calm, but inside something was building, not anger exactly, something colder, more patient. Sergeant approached her. "Captain," he said with a small bow, "I am glad you are here." "I heard about this morning," said quietly. "The book incident." "It was nothing," said. "They do not understand, they cannot understand, not yet." "Perhaps it is time they learned," said. Looked at her carefully. He knew what she was capable of. He had seen her fight in the border wars. He had watched her do things that the aliens would call impossible. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once they see, they will never look at us the same way." "That is exactly the point," said. She walked toward the center of the arena. Her steps were quiet, almost silent. The alien soldiers did not notice her at first. They were too busy celebrating their victories. "General," said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried through the arena. Everyone stopped and turned. "I request permission to demonstrate." General looked at her with surprise. "Captain, you wish to show human combat techniques. Lieutenant already demonstrated." With respect, said. "What the lieutenant showed was only the foundation. There is more." Laughed openly. "More? What more can there be? The human body has limits, 2 arms, 2 legs, no special organs, no natural weapons. You cannot change biology." Turned to face him. Her eyes met his without fear. "You read Sergeant's book this morning. You saw stories of warriors who did impossible things." "Fairy tales," said dismissively. "Let me show you the fairy tale," said. The arena grew very quiet. Something in her voice had changed. It was still calm, still polite, but there was weight behind it now, purpose. "What exactly do you propose?" General asked. "A demonstration," said. "I will face 3 opponents at once, any 3, any species, using only what those fairy tales taught me." Murmurs spread through the arena, 3 against 1. Even the best commanders rarely attempted such odds, and this small human woman was volunteering. Stepped forward. "I accept this challenge. I will choose the 3 opponents myself." "Agreed," said. Smiled with all his sharp teeth showing. "With me." The 3 aliens took positions around. Was a massive with arms like tree trunks. Was a quick who had won every sparring match that day. Himself was the most experienced warrior in the room. "This is unwise," Veen said from the sidelines. "The human will be hurt." "Then she should not have made such a foolish challenge," replied. Stood in the center, she did not take a fighting stance. She simply stood there with her hands at her sides, relaxed, patient, like someone waiting for a bus. "Is she giving up already?" asked with confusion. "Begin," announced General. The three aliens attacked, came from the front with all four arms swinging, circled to strike from behind, moved to cut off any escape. What happened next would be discussed for years. It would be studied by military academies across the galaxy, and it would change everything the alien species believed about humans. Moved. That was the only way to describe it. One moment she was standing still. The next moment she was flowing through the attacks like water through rocks. His four arms hit nothing but air. His precise strike missed completely. His blocking position became useless because there was nothing to block. She did not fight them. She moved between them, around them, through them. Her body bent in ways that seemed impossible. Her feet barely touched the ground. Her hands were everywhere and nowhere. Then she struck. 3 quick touches, one to his neck, one to his chest, one to his knee, simple touches, gentle even, like a teacher tapping a student's shoulder. Collapsed, his four arms went limp. He could not move them. Fell backward. He gasped for air but could not catch his breath. His lungs had forgotten how to work. Dropped to one knee. His leg would not support his weight anymore. The nerves had stopped sending signals. The entire arena was silent. 3 of the best warriors from 2 species, defeated in less than 5 seconds, by touches so gentle they left no marks. Stood among them, she was not even breathing hard. Her uniform was not wrinkled. Her hair was still perfectly in place. "In my homeland," she said, "we have stories about warriors who could stop hearts with a finger, who could paralyze enemies without drawing blood, who could defeat armies without killing anyone." She looked around the arena. Every eye was on her. "You called these stories fairy tales. You laughed at our ancestors' wisdom. You thought they were lies invented by weak minds." She walked slowly around the 3 fallen warriors. They were recovering now. The effects of her touches were temporary, but they would remember this moment forever. "Our myths are not fantasies," said. "They are instruction manuals. They are encoded knowledge passed down through hundreds of generations. Every story contains real techniques, real power, hidden in plain sight so only those who truly study will find it." Managed to stand. His leg was working again, but his pride was still wounded. "How?" he demanded. "Explain what you did." Smiled slightly. "Your species has powerful bodies, 4 arms, great strength, so your fighting methods focus on power. You never needed to look for other ways." She turned to "Your species has quick minds, perfect coordination, so your fighting methods focus on precision. You never needed to look deeper either." Finally, she looked at the human soldiers. They stood taller now, prouder. "Humans are weak. We have no natural advantages. We are small and soft compared to many species in the galaxy, so we had to find other ways, ways hidden in the space between strength and speed, ways that required thousands of years to discover and perfect." "The pressure points," said slowly. He was an intellectual. He was trying to understand. "You targeted nerve clusters." "Yes," said, "but knowing where to strike is not enough. You must know when, how hard, at what angle, which points to combine. This knowledge cannot be learned from data files. It can only be learned through practice, through tradition, through stories that contain the truth within metaphor." "The dragon breathing fire," said from the sidelines. Everyone turned to him. "It represents the breath control necessary for internal energy techniques." "The warrior fighting the tiger with bare hands," added. "It represents the understanding of anatomy that makes weapons unnecessary." "The spirits that haunt old houses," continued. They represent the awareness of space and energy that allows a fighter to know when someone is behind them without seeing. General leaned forward in his observation window. He was fascinated. You are saying that every human myth contains such knowledge? Not every myth, said, but many of them. The ones that survived for thousands of years did so because they contained value, practical value that kept our ancestors alive. Was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He bowed. It was a small bow, just a slight lowering of his head, but for a commander it was a significant gesture. I apologize, he said, to you, and to Sergeant we mocked what we did not understand. Nodded in acceptance. Understanding is why we are here, to learn from each other. Then teach us, Veen said. She stepped forward with genuine interest. Show us what your stories contain. Looked at, the old sergeant nodded slightly. Very well, said, but I warn you, this will not be easy. Our myths took centuries to master. You cannot learn them in a day. We are patient, said, and we do not make the same mistake twice. We will not underestimate humans again. Smiled, it was a warm smile, a teacher's smile. Then let us begin. The first lesson comes from a story about a monkey king who learned to fight from watching water flow over stones. The alien soldiers gathered around her. Their mockery was forgotten. Their arrogance was gone. In its place was something better. Curiosity, respect, and a willingness to learn. The human myths were about to reveal their true power. 3 days had passed since Captain's demonstration in the arena. Everything had changed on the base. The alien soldiers no longer sat in separate groups. They gathered around the human soldiers asking questions. They wanted to learn about the stories, about the hidden knowledge. The training schedules had been reorganized. General himself had requested it. Half of each day was now dedicated to cross-cultural combat training. The humans taught. The aliens learned. It was not easy for anyone. Stood in the middle of the practice room. He was trying to copy a simple movement that Sergeant had shown him. It looked so easy when the human did it. A gentle shift of weight, a slight turn of the hips, a flowing motion from feet to fingertips. But when tried it, he looked like a machine with broken parts. His 4 arms did not know what to do. His massive body resisted the soft movements. Again, said patiently, feel the ground beneath your feet. Let your body become like water. I am not water, growled in frustration. We are stone and steel. We do not flow. That is your first mistake, said. You believe your body can only move in one way. But the body is capable of many things. Your ancestors on Prime, did they always fight the same way? Paused, he thought about this. No, he admitted. The earliest warriors were different before we developed our current methods. They were more flexible. Because they had to be, said. Every species starts the same way. Survival requires adaptation. It is only later when we become comfortable that we forget how to change. On the other side of the room, Lieutenant Veen was practicing with. The soldier was having better luck then. Her natural grace helped her understand the flowing movements. But she still struggled with something else. I cannot feel it, Veen said with frustration. You say there is energy flowing through the body. You say I must learn to sense it, but I feel nothing. Nodded, this is the hardest part. The rely on mathematics and measurement. You believe only in what can be seen and tested. Because that is how the universe works, Veen said. Everything can be explained by science. There is no mystical energy. That is superstition. Is it? Asked. She placed her hand on Veen's shoulder. When you enter a room and sense danger before you see it, what is that? Subconscious pattern recognition, Veen answered immediately. The brain processes information faster than conscious awareness. Yes, agreed. That is one explanation, but our ancestors had another name for it. They called it sensing the energy of a place. The same thing described differently. So when your myths speak of energy and spirits, they are really talking about neuroscience, Veen asked. They are talking about real things, said. The explanations change over time, the reality does not. Across the room was working with a human soldier named, was the who had been defeated by in the arena. Since then, he had become the most eager student. He practiced constantly. He asked endless questions. Show me again, said, the part where you disappear. Smiled, I do not disappear. I simply move to where you are not looking. But how? Demanded. I watch carefully, I use all my eyes, but you still vanish. Because watching is not the same as seeing, said. Your eyes show you what you expect. I move outside of your expectations. Frowned, this was too philosophical for him. He preferred direct answers. There is a story, said, about a master who could walk through a crowded market without anyone noticing him. He was not invisible. He simply moved in ways that the eye naturally ignored. That sounds impossible, said. Many things sound impossible until you learn how to do them, replied. Watch me again. Do not try to see me. Try to feel where I am. Moved, he did not move fast. He did not use any tricks. He simply walked in a certain way. His steps had a rhythm that confused the eye. His body language said nothing important is happening here. Pay attention to something else. Lost track of him instantly. When tapped his shoulder from behind, jumped in surprise. How? Asked again. But this time there was wonder in his voice instead of frustration. Practice, said, and listening to the old stories, they teach us how to be seen and how to be unseen. General walked through the practice room. He stopped to watch each pair of students and teachers. What he saw amazed him. 3 days ago, these species had been strangers. They had mocked each other. They had competed instead of cooperated. Now they were learning together, growing together. All because of some old books and the wisdom they contained. He approached, Captain, may I speak with you? Stepped away from Veen. Of course, General. They walked to a quiet corner of the room, looked troubled. I have received a communication from Alliance Command, he said. They have been monitoring our training exercises. They are interested in what is happening here. Interested how? Asked. They want to understand the human techniques. They want them documented and analyzed. They want to create training programs for all Alliance soldiers. Was quiet for a moment. That would be difficult. Why? Your techniques work. We have seen the proof. Why not share them widely? Because they cannot be learned from documents, explained. These methods require something more than instruction. They require understanding, deep understanding that takes years to develop. Looked skeptical. They have trained soldiers using standardized programs for centuries. Any skill can be broken down into steps. Any technique can be analyzed and taught. Perhaps, said, but what we teach is not just technique. It is philosophy. It is a way of thinking about the body and the world. Without that foundation, the techniques are useless. She pointed at who was still struggling with basic movements. The commander is one of the finest warriors in the military, yet he cannot master a simple stance, not because he lacks ability, because he has not yet changed how he thinks. And the myths help with this, asked. The myths are the teachers, said. We humans do not learn well from instruction manuals. We learn from stories, from examples, from heroes who show us what is possible. Considered this. Then perhaps Alliance Command should study the myths themselves, not the techniques. Smiled, now you begin to understand. Later that evening, the soldiers gathered in the common room for a meal. The atmosphere was different now. Sat with humans, shared tables with everyone. There was talking and even laughter between the species. Sergeant sat in his usual spot near the window, but he was not reading alone anymore. A circle of alien soldiers surrounded him. They listened as he told stories from his book. There was once a general named Yi, said. He lived hundreds of years ago on Earth. He was asked to defend his country against an invasion, but he had only a small army. His enemies had thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. "What did he do?" asked. He leaned forward with eagerness. "He studied the water," said. "The enemies would come by sea. General, you learned everything about the currents and tides. He designed special ships covered in iron spikes, ships that looked like dragons." "Dragons again," said, but he was smiling now. "Always dragons with you humans." "The dragon represents power that is different from brute strength," explained. "General, you did not defeat his enemies with a bigger army. He defeated them with understanding. He knew the water. He knew his ships. He knew what his enemies would do before they did it." "Like the flowing water technique," Veen said thoughtfully, "using the enemy's force against them." "Exactly," said. "The story is not just history, it is instruction. It teaches us that true strength comes from understanding, not from size or numbers." "What happened to General Yi?" asked a young soldier. "He won every battle," said. "He never lost a single ship to enemy action. His iron dragon ships became legendary. Even today, his tactics are studied by human military commanders." The aliens murmured with appreciation. They were beginning to see patterns now. The stories were connected. Each one taught something different but related. Together, they formed a complete philosophy of combat and life. Watch from across the room. She was pleased with what she saw, but she was also worried. She approached after the storytelling was finished. "May I speak with you privately?" They walked outside onto a balcony overlooking the base. The sky of planet was purple with 3 moons visible, a strange and beautiful sight. "You are concerned," said. It was not a question. "Alliance Command wants to weaponize our knowledge," said. "They want to turn our myths into training manuals, to create soldiers who can use our techniques without understanding them." Nodded slowly. "This was always a possibility. When you reveal something valuable, others will want to take it." "What should we do?" Was quiet for a long moment. He looked up at the 3 moons. "On Earth, there is a story about a master who was asked to teach his secrets to a king. The king wanted to create an army of invincible warriors." "What did the master do?" asked. "He taught the king's soldiers everything, every technique, every secret. He held nothing back." Frowned. "That seems unwise." "It was very wise," said. "Because the soldiers learned the movements but not the meaning. They could copy the techniques but not understand them. In battle, they failed. Their bodies knew what to do, but their minds did not believe. So the techniques are useless without the philosophy," said. "Not useless, limited. A soldier who learns only technique can defeat ordinary enemies, but against a master who truly understands, they will always fail." Considered this. "So we should let Alliance Command try to create their training programs." "Let them try," agreed. "They will learn the same lesson the ancient king learned. Some knowledge cannot be separated from its source. You cannot take the wisdom out of the story. You cannot take the meaning out of the myth." "And the soldiers here on this base, the ones we are teaching now?" Smiled. "They are different. They want to understand, not just to learn. That is why they are succeeding where others will fail." They stood in silence, watching the moons move slowly across the purple sky. Below them, the base was quiet. Most soldiers were sleeping, preparing for another day of training. But somewhere in the common room was still practicing. He moved through the basic stances again and again. His movements were still clumsy. His body still resisted. But he was beginning to understand something. It was not about the movement itself. It was about what the movement represented, a connection to thousands of years of human struggle and learning, a tradition that had been passed down through countless generations. He would never move like a human. His body was too different. His biology would not allow it. But he could understand like a human. He could learn to see the world the way they saw it. And that understanding would make him a better warrior than any amount of technique training ever could. In his quarters, took out the book of myths he had borrowed from Sargent. He opened it carefully now, respectfully. He began to read the story of the Monkey King and the Water Stone. The words were simple, the pictures were primitive. A child could read this book in an hour. But read slowly. He thought about each sentence. He looked for the hidden meanings. He asked himself what the ancient humans were trying to teach. And slowly, very slowly, he began to understand. The myths were not about dragons or spirits or impossible feats. They were about becoming something more than you were. They were about transformation. And for the first time in his life, wanted to transform. The aliens had come to mock human legends. Now they stayed to learn from them. And the lessons were only beginning. 2 weeks had passed. The base on planet had become something new. It was no longer just a training facility. It had become a place of learning, a place where the walls between species were breaking down. But not everyone was happy with this change. Colonel arrived on a transport ship from Alliance High Command. He was a military inspector. His job was to evaluate the training program and report back to the council. He had heard strange rumors about what was happening on. Rumors about humans teaching aliens to fight using ancient stories. Rumors about techniques that scientific explanation. He did not believe any of it. Was old school. He believed in measurable results, in data and statistics, in methods that could be tested, and the idea that fairy tales could improve combat effectiveness was ridiculous. He walked through the base with General at his side. His 4 eyes took in everything. The mixed groups of soldiers training together. The strange, slow movements they practiced. The books and scrolls displayed in common areas. "This is highly irregular," said. His voice was cold and sharp. "Where is the standard training protocol? Where are the combat simulators?" "We still use them," explained. "But we have added new elements to the program. The human techniques have proven valuable." "Valuable how? Show me the combat scores. Show me the improvement statistics." Hesitated. "The improvement is difficult to measure with standard tests. The soldiers are developing abilities that our assessment tools cannot quantify." Made a sound of disgust. "Cannot quantify. In other words, there is no evidence that this works. You have wasted 2 weeks on mystical nonsense." They entered the main training arena. A demonstration was in progress. Stood in the center, facing 3 younger soldiers. 2 weeks ago, he would have defeated them in seconds using standard combat methods. But he was not using standard methods today. The 3 soldiers attacked, moved between them with a flowing grace that seemed impossible for his massive body. He redirected their strikes. He unbalanced them with gentle touches. He used their own momentum against them. In less than a minute, all 3 were on the ground, and had barely moved from his original position. His 4 eyes narrowed. What technique was that? "It has no official name," said. "The humans call it water flowing through rocks. It teaches warriors to use softness to overcome hardness." "Softness," repeated with contempt. "They have conquered 100 worlds through strength. Softness is weakness." "Is it?" said a voice from behind them. They turned. Captain stood there. She had approached without either of them hearing. For someone as alert as this was embarrassing. "You are the human captain," said, "the one responsible for this experiment." "I am captain, and it is not an experiment. It is education." "Education in what?" "Ancient superstition. Fighting methods that cannot be measured or proven." Remained calm. "Colonel, may I ask you a question?" Waved one of his hands impatiently. "Ask." "When you entered this arena, how many soldiers did you count?" Frowned. "I did not count. That is not relevant." "There are 47 soldiers present," said, "including yourself. 17, 15 humans. Did you notice the human soldier standing 3 meters to your left?" Turned. There was indeed a human soldier standing nearby. A young man named Jin. He stood perfectly still, his presence somehow easy to overlook. "I did not see him," admitted reluctantly. "He was there when you entered. He did not move. He did not hide. Yet you did not see him." His voice was gentle but firm. "Our legends contain techniques for becoming invisible without disappearing, for being present without being noticed. These techniques cannot be measured, but they work." Tricks said dismissively. "Useful perhaps for spies, not for real warriors." "Then let me show you what our real warriors can do," said. She stepped into the center of the arena. The soldiers cleared a space around her. "I will face any challenge you choose," said Tu. "Any opponent, any number, any conditions. If I fail, you may shut down this program. If I succeed, you will allow it to continue for 6 more months." Considered this. He did not like the human's confidence. It felt like arrogance, like she was mocking him somehow. "Very well," he said. "I choose the conditions myself." He pulled out a communication device and spoke into it. "Send in the training unit, full combat gear, maximum difficulty." The doors at the far end of the arena opened. 10 soldiers marched in, but these were not regular soldiers. They were combat robots, machines designed for the most dangerous training scenarios. They had no feelings, no hesitation, no fear. "You will face these," said. "They are programmed for lethal force, real weapons, real danger." The soldiers in the arena looked concerned, even stepped forward to protest. "Colonel, this is too much. No single soldier can face 10 combat units." "She made the challenge," said coldly. "If human techniques are so powerful, let her prove it." Did not hesitate, she did not protest. She simply nodded and took a deep breath. Sergeant watched from the observation area. His face was calm, but his hands gripped the railing tightly. He had seen fight many times. He knew what she was capable of. But 10 combat robots with lethal weapons was extreme. "Begin," commanded. The robots attacked instantly. They moved with mechanical precision. Their weapons fired. Their blades sliced through the air. Closed her eyes. This surprised everyone. How could she fight with her eyes closed? It seemed like suicide. But then something remarkable happened. She began to move, not with her eyes, with something else, some other sense that the aliens could not name. She knew where each robot was. She knew where each attack would come from, not because she saw it, but because she felt it. The disturbance in the air, the vibration in the floor, the subtle sounds of mechanical joints moving. The legends called it the warrior's intuition, the ability to perceive danger before it arrived, to sense attacks before they were launched. Moved through the robots like a ghost. Energy blasts passed within centimeters of her body. Blades cut only air. She was never where the attacks landed. And she struck back. Her hands found weak points in the robot design. Her fingers pressed control nodes that caused systems to fail. Her feet kicked at joints that were not meant to bend. One by one, the robots fell. It took less than 2 minutes. 10 combat robots designed for lethal training lay scattered across the arena. Their lights flickered and died. Their weapons were silent. Stood among them, she opened her eyes. She was breathing hard now. Sweat covered her face. This had been her limit, pushed to the very edge. But she had won. The arena was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Stared at the destruction. His mind tried to process what he had seen. It was impossible. The human had moved faster than his eyes could follow. She had anticipated attacks that had no warning. She had found weaknesses that even the robot's designers did not know existed. "How?" he finally asked. His voice was hoarse. Walked toward him slowly. She stopped a few feet away. "There is a legend," she said, "about a blind swordsman who could defeat any opponent. He could not see, so he learned to perceive the world in other ways, ways that seeing people never developed." Legends said, but his contempt was gone now. Only confusion remained. "Our myths preserve techniques that took thousands of years to perfect," continued. Techniques developed by desperate people who had no other advantages. No 4 arms, no enhanced bodies, just their minds and their determination. She looked around the arena at all the soldiers watching. Human, all united in this moment of wonder. Humans survived on Earth because we learned to adapt. We faced predators larger and faster than us. We faced environments that should have killed us. We faced each other in countless wars, and through all of it we learned. We encoded that learning into stories, into myths, into legends. She turned back to, "You can shut down this program. You can dismiss our methods as superstition, but you cannot erase thousands of years of human wisdom, and you cannot deny what you just saw with your own eyes." Was quiet for a long moment. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides. All his certainty had been shaken. "I came here to end this program," he said finally. "I thought it was a waste of resources, a distraction from real military training." He paused, everyone waited. "I was wrong." The soldiers in the arena let out their breath. Some of them cheered, stepped forward and placed one of his massive hands on shoulder. "I do not understand how you did what you did," continued. "I cannot explain it with science, but I cannot deny it either." "Understanding will come," said. "Give us time. Give your soldiers time. Let them learn the stories. Let them find the wisdom hidden inside." Nodded slowly. 6 months. You have 6 months to show measurable results, not fairy tales, real improvement that I can report to the council. "That is fair," said. "And I want to learn too," said. This surprised everyone. "If there is real knowledge in your legends, I want to understand it, not just witness it." Smiled. "Then you are welcome to join our training, but I warn you, the first lesson is the hardest." "What is the first lesson?" "To admit that you know nothing, to become like a child again, ready to learn without judgment, without assumptions." Looked at her. A colonel being asked to become like a child. It was humbling, perhaps even humiliating. But he had seen the impossible today. He had watched a small human woman defeat 10 combat machines with techniques that explanation. If admitting ignorance was the price of understanding, he would pay it. "I am ready," he said. Watch from above. He allowed himself a small smile. Another skeptic converted, another mind opened. The myths were spreading, not through force or conquest, but through demonstration, through example, through the simple power of showing what was possible. This was how humans had always survived, not by being the strongest, not by being the fastest, but by being adaptable, by learning, by sharing knowledge in forms that could never be destroyed. You could burn books, you could ban teachings, you could try to erase history. But you could not kill a story. Stories lived in the minds of those who heard them. They passed from generation to generation. They evolved and adapted but never died. The alien species were learning this now. They were discovering that the most powerful weapon in the galaxy was not a gun or a ship or a bomb. It was a story. And humans had thousands of them, each one containing power that the galaxy had never imagined. The next 6 months would change everything. And it all started with a book of legends that aliens had mocked as children's tales. Now those tales were becoming the foundation of a new kind of warrior. Warriors who understood that true strength came from wisdom. Warriors who knew that myths were not lies. They were the most dangerous truths of all. 6 months later, the base on planet was a different place. Word had spread across the Alliance. Military officers from dozens of species came to observe, to learn, to understand. The training program had become famous. It was called the Myth Integration Program. Soldiers who completed it were considered elite. They possessed skills that could not be taught in any other way. Colonel stood in the observation room overlooking the main arena. He was not the same who had arrived 6 months ago. His body had not changed much. He was still large and powerful, but his eyes had changed. They held something new, Depth, patience, understanding. Beside him stood general and captain. They watched as a new group of soldiers demonstrated their progress. In the arena below, soldiers from 12 different species moved in harmony. They practiced the flowing techniques that humans had taught them. Each species had adapted the movements to their own bodies, used their forearms in ways their ancestors never imagined, combined their natural grace with centuries of human wisdom. Even species without limbs had found ways to use the principles. "The Council is pleased," said. "Combat effectiveness among program graduates has increased by 40%. Injury rates have dropped by 60%. These numbers cannot be argued with." "Numbers are only part of it," said. "The real change is harder to measure." Nodded, they fight differently now, not with anger or fear, with clarity, with purpose. "They have become philosophers as well as warriors," agreed. "They think before they act. They see beyond the immediate battle to the larger war." Down in the arena led a group through an advanced exercise. He had become one of the best teachers in the program. His journey from mocker to master had inspired many others. He moved with a grace that seemed impossible for his massive body. His forearms flowed like water. His feet barely touched the ground. He had not become human. He had become something new, something that combined the best of power with human wisdom. "There is a story," told his students, "about a mountain that tried to stop a river. The mountain was strong. The river was soft. But over time the river carved a path through the mountain, not by force, by persistence, by flowing around every obstacle." He demonstrated a technique while speaking. His movements matched his words. The students watched and learned not just the physical motions but the meaning behind them. "We always tried to be the mountain," continued. "Immovable, indestructible, but the river always wins, always. Now we learn to be both. Strong when strength is needed, flowing when flow is needed." Sergeant watched from the side of the arena. His old book of legends sat on a bench beside him. The pages were even more worn now. Many hands had touched them. Many eyes had read the stories. But the book itself was no longer important. The stories had left the pages. They lived now in the minds and bodies of thousands of soldiers. They had been translated into 100 languages, adapted for 100 different species. The human myths had become galactic myths. A young human soldier named approached. She was one of the recruits to the program. Her eyes were bright with curiosity. "Sergeant," she said respectfully, "may I ask you something?" Nodded, "Of course." "How did you know? That first day when the aliens mocked your book, how did you know they would eventually want to learn?" Smiled. It was a gentle smile full of memory. "I did not know, not for certain, but I had hope." "Hope?" "Every species thinks they are special," explained. "They believe their way is the best way, the only way, but deep down they all know the truth. Every being in the universe is searching for something more, something beyond their current understanding." He picked up his old book and held it carefully. "Our ancestors knew this. They put wisdom into stories because stories travel. They cross boundaries. They reach hearts that facts cannot reach." "But why stories?" asked. "Why not just teach the techniques directly?" "Because techniques can be forgotten. Methods can be lost, but stories live forever." Opened the book to a page showing a dragon flying through clouds. "This dragon does not exist. No fire-breathing lizard ever flew over ancient Korea, but the truth the dragon represents, the power of transformation, of rising above your nature to become something greater, that truth is eternal." Looked at the picture with new understanding. So every myth is really about change. Every myth is about possibility, said. They say this is what you are now, and this is what you could become. The distance between those 2 points is the journey we all must make. In the observation room, received a message on her communication device. She read it, and her expression became serious. "What is it?" asked. "A distress signal from the outer rim. A colony is under attack by unknown forces. Stepped forward. Which unit is closest? We are, said, our graduates, the myth soldiers. The three officers looked at each other. This would be the first real test. Training was one thing. Combat was another. Could the techniques that worked in the arena work in actual battle? Mobilize everyone, ordered. Full combat deployment. Within the hour, transport ships lifted off from planet. They carried soldiers from 12 species, all trained in the same program, all carrying the same wisdom in their minds and bodies. The colony on Nexus Minor was burning when they arrived. Unknown attackers had come from outside Alliance space. They were a species never before encountered, tall and thin with black armor that absorbed light. They fought without sound, without mercy. The battle that followed would be recorded in history books across the galaxy. The Alliance soldiers did not fight like separate species. They moved as one force. Warriors flowed around enemy attacks instead of meeting them head-on. Fighters used misdirection and perception tricks to appear where enemies did not expect. Humans led small groups that struck weak points with precision. The enemy had never seen anything like it. They were used to fighting species one at a time, species that had predictable methods and obvious weaknesses. But these soldiers had no single method. They adapted constantly. They changed tactics in mid-battle. They communicated without words. Led a charge into the enemy center, but it was not a charge of overwhelming force. He moved like water through their ranks. His 4 arms disarmed enemies instead of killing them. He created confusion and fear. Fought alongside and soldiers. They protected each other. They anticipated each other's needs. They moved as if they had trained together for years instead of months. Did not fight. He was too old for combat, but he was there watching from a command post. He saw his students using everything he had taught them, not just the techniques, the philosophy, the mindset, the ancient wisdom that had kept humanity alive for 10,000 years. The enemy began to retreat. They had expected an easy victory. They had found something else entirely. As the last attackers fled into space, the Alliance soldiers stood among the ruins of the colony. They were tired, some were wounded, but they had won. And they had won together. A soldier named stood beside a named. They had once mocked each other. Now they had fought side by side, saved each other's lives. The old stories were right, said. He was breathing hard but smiling. About many warriors becoming one warrior, about unity being stronger than numbers. Nodded, I understand now. Why the humans kept their myths for so long. They are not memories of the past. They are instructions for the future. Gathered the soldiers for a moment of rest. They sat in a circle, different species mixed together. She looked at their faces, exhausted but proud, changed forever by what they had learned and what they had done. There is a story, she began. The soldiers leaned in to listen. This had become a ritual after every training session, after every challenge, a story to help them understand. Long ago in ancient Korea, there was a village threatened by a great enemy. The villagers were farmers and fishermen. They had no weapons, no training, no hope. She paused, the soldiers waited. But a stranger came to the village, an old man with a book of stories. He did not teach them to fight. He taught them to see, to understand, to believe in what they could become. The villagers learned the old man's stories, and through the stories they found strength they did not know they had. They became warriors, not because they had weapons, but because they had wisdom. Looked around the circle. You are those villagers now. You came from different worlds, different species, different histories, but you share the same stories, the same wisdom, the same power. She stood up. And this is only the beginning. Every battle you fight, every challenge you face adds to the story. Yours will tell tales of what happened here today, and they're after them. Raised one of his 4 fists in salute. For the myths. For the myths, the soldiers echoed, human and all the others. Back on planet, Sergeant heard about the victory. He sat alone in the common room in his usual spot near the window. His old book lay open in front of him. He turned to the last page. There was a note written there in faded ink. His grandfather had written it long ago. "These stories are not mine. They belong to everyone. Pass them on. Let them change, let them grow, but never let them die." Closed the book and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, soldiers trained in human wisdom were protecting the galaxy. Species that had once mocked human legends now carried those legends in their hearts. The myths had not just survived, they had conquered. Not through force, through truth, through the simple power of a good story. And as long as there were beings willing to listen, the stories would continue. Forever changing those who heard them. Forever making the impossible possible. This was humanity's true power. Not weapons, not technology, not numbers. Stories. The oldest weapon in the universe. And the most powerful. The aliens had learned this now. They would never forget. And the myths would live on, spreading from world to world, generation to generation, species to species. Until the entire galaxy believed. The end.